Laura Vanderkam is the author of several time management and productivity books, including Tranquility by Tuesday, 9 Ways to Calm the Chaos and Make Time for What Matters, which is actually out today. Her other books are Juliet, School of Possibilities, Off the Clock, I Know How She Does It, What the Most Successful People Do Before Breakfast, and 168 Hours. Her work has appeared in publications including The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, and Fortune. She's the host of the podcast Before Breakfast and the co-host with Sarah Hart Unger of the podcast Best of Both Worlds, one of my favorites, I have to say. She lives outside Philadelphia with her husband and 5 children and blogs at lauravanderkam.com. Laura, welcome back to Hustle and Grace.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back. I really appreciate it.
I'm so excited. I have to say, you're my first repeat guest.
Ooh,
so
exciting.
So it is exciting. It's very exciting for me. And happy book launch day. The day that this episode comes out, your new book, Tranquility by Tuesday, will be here. It is here.
So exciting. Yeah. So exciting. Yeah. I mean, as you know, book writing is just such a long process, multiple years. So to have it finally be the day is very, you wait for it a long time.
Oh, yeah. And I was just perusing it last night, and I just have to say, I feel so seen with this book. It's like it's written for someone just like me, because you talk about it's the busy years, and I feel so busy between kids and work. And I have to say, there are times when I feel like borderline frazzled, and I'm like, there's just more to do. There are more people that need me than I have time. And I think, well, Laura has 5 kids. I only have 2. So if she can do what she's doing, I can do this. So thank you for your encouragement.
Oh, thanks. I don't think 5 kids is like 2.5 as much time as 2. I mean, once you have any kids, it's just all, juggling more plates.
There are certainly plates. So let's talk about Tranquility by Tuesday. Will you give our listeners just an idea of overall just what it's about?
Yeah. So Tranquility by Tuesday is about 9 of my favorite time management rules. And what I did is I had 150 people try out these 9 rules over the course of 9 weeks. Each week they would learn a rule. They would answer questions about how they plan to use it, answer questions a week later about how it went. I measured them on various dimensions through the whole project, and so I could see how their lives were changing. And I'm very happy to report that people following these rules for 9 weeks did in fact see their time satisfaction scores rise significantly, which is very exciting. But basically the idea is, when we are in these busy years, like we get done what we have to do, but it can often feel like we are wishing time away, or that it's going too fast, or we're not enjoying it. Life can feel like a slog. And so, I'm telling people, I want you to be able to enjoy your time. Like, I want you to feel like you genuinely have things to look forward to, and that you're still making progress on your goals, even when life is occasionally chaotic. So that is the point of Tranquility by Tuesday.
I love that. And I would love to dive into a few of your rules or guidelines for people who don't like rules. The first one is give yourself a bedtime. And this makes so much sense to me, and yet I seem to struggle with it. So can you tell us why, having a bedtime as an adult can sort of help you have a more peaceful, enriching, tranquil life?
Yes, of course. This is the rule that, I think a lot of people have this experience. You're like, yes, it makes so much sense, and still so hard to do. One person told me that they thought this was the least sexy, but the most impactful rule of anything in the book. I believe that. So what happens? I have been fascinated over the years. I study how people spend time. And there's a huge discrepancy between how much people think they sleep and how much they actually sleep. And so many reputable time diary studies that have had people track how they spend their time find that the average American sleeps over 8 hours per day. I have found that, similar things in my study, even people who are in, the depths of the busy years, people with huge careers who are raising kids, also get a reasonable amount of sleep per day. And, between 7 and 8 hours, that is generally accepted that adults should get. And yet, you ask people how much they sleep on a typical night, they'll tell you some ridiculously low number, like 6 or something. Right. And it's not true. So it's like, well, where does that discrepancy come from? And what I've realized from studying time diaries is people will often sleep 6 hours on like Monday and Tuesday. And then they spend the rest of the week catching up on that sleep debt, with their bodies forcing them to substitute sleep for other activities. So you sleep short Monday and Tuesday night, and then after that, you're crashing on the couch while watching TV, or falling asleep while you're putting your kids to bed, or sleeping through an alarm, or hitting snooze 3 times and sleeping in on weekend and catching a nap when you can, and so forth. And then the cycle repeats itself. And so numerically, it comes out to a good number, but you're either undershooting or overshooting in a way that makes it hard to establish good routines, or even, not feel exhausted. So giving yourself a bedtime is because most adults can't really move the time they wake up in the morning that much. You have to be up for work responsibilities or family responsibilities. So the only variable that can move is the time you go to sleep the night before. So by being a little bit more orderly about this, by choosing a time that is the amount of sleep you need before the time you need to wake up, allows you to just not feel exhausted. You never build up a sleep debt. And so then you aren't needing to substitute sleep for other activities through the rest of the week. Your bedtime, it's just a math problem. If you are somebody who needs 7 hours of sleep and you need to wake up at 6 a.m., then your bedtime is 11 p.m. If you need 8 hours of sleep and you can wake up at 7, then your bedtime can also be 11 p.m. If you need 8 hours of sleep and you're waking up at 5, your bedtime needs to be 9. I mean, this is really just, math that you count back whatever number of hours it is. And the upside of doing this that people found is they had so much more energy. They felt so much more productive. They were able to handle their responsibilities. Like, life just did not seem as hard when they never approached a day intentionally sleep deprived. Like, sometimes it happens to the best of us. You're up in the middle of the night for a reason or whatever. But if you can avoid that, don't do it to yourself. Don't stay up later than your bedtime for no good reason.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting too that people sort of lack a self-awareness. Like, they think that they're getting this amount of sleep, but when they take the time to track it, you're getting new data by just time tracking. And I think in your book and probably in your podcast too, you've talked about how you track your time, and you've been tracking it since like 2015. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. I've been tracking my time for 7 years now.
That's amazing. That there's so much information that you can glean there. Here's what I'm curious about. You're good at taking note of what you've done and keeping sort of like a log of that and a journal of that. Are you as meticulous about planning the future? Like, do you plan your days in half-hour increments, or what does planning look like for you?
Yeah. So I do not plan in half-hour increments unless I really, really need to, because the day is just completely packed full and that's what has to happen. In general, I plan my life in weeks. The second Tranquility by Tuesday rule is to plan on Fridays. And I really think that any busy person, even if you're not busy, I think it's a good idea to have a designated weekly planning time. In the book, I argue why Fridays, but for now, let's just say whatever it is, choose a time, but stick with it.
But it should be Fridays.
It should be Friday. It should be Friday. It is the best day. But, I think through the upcoming week, I think, what do I want to see happen over the next week? What goals are important to me over the next week, both professionally and personally? I use 3 categories: career, relationship, self. I look at what else needs to happen. I see if there are any logistical issues that need to be solved, anything along those lines. And then I basically have my marching orders for the week. And I keep glancing at this plan. I glance at it multiple times per day. And if it looks like I have a particularly busy day, any given day, then I will map that day out more specifically. Like, these are the things I want to do at this particular time at this day. But generally, I'm pulling things from that list and assigning them to different days, depending on what the day winds up looking like.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I have found that, especially in these busy years, the more I plan ahead, the happier I am with my decisions. Like, whether it is, I know I need to get to the gym at least 3 times this week, I better put it on my calendar, or like, will I do it? Will I not? Like it's easy to get caught up in whatever feels most urgent in the moment, rather than, necessarily what is most important. But another one of your tips is that, well, really it's an idea or a maxim. It's that 3 times a week is a habit. And I love this because I have to say, I think I even emailed you last year, I was so proud. I was doing a streak, right? I was like, I'm reading the New Testament every day. I'm working on my Spanish every day. And then in May of last year, I had a baby and it all stopped. Like
It
the streak
happens.
ended.
Yep.
It was going so good. But you say that, in order to have good habits in your life, it doesn't have to be every day or not at all. So can you unpack a little bit about the 3 times a week as a habit?
Yeah, I was so excited to just hear you say a few minutes ago that you went to the gym 3 times a week, or that's what you were aiming to do. I'm like, oh, yes, she's thinking of the 3 times a week as a habit. Because, when you are in the busy years, there's a great many things that we would like to have in our lives and be part of our lives. But if we set it up that it needs to happen at the same time every single day, it's just not going to happen. There are very few people who could get to the gym 7 days a week. And curiously, many of the people who claim they go daily do not, in fact, go daily. They might go Monday through Friday, but they do not, in fact, go daily. They don't go on weekends. They don't go on holidays, or they don't go on, a day when they're sick or something. But whatever. We'll leave that aside. So 3 times a week is a reasonable frequency, right? It is frequent. It is not always, but it is often doable. Because often with these things like going to the gym or practicing Spanish, or reading the New Testament, or whatever it is that you are looking to do, we find that we are doing these things we are just doing them not as much as I want. But of course, not as much as I want is a very different issue than doing it like none. And so people are like, oh, I never get to do this. I never get it. So no, you do it maybe once a week, or, occasionally a couple times a month, or maybe even twice a week. But if our goal then is 3 times a week, well, that's very exciting. We only have to do it 1 or 2 more times per week and we're there, right? So it's about changing our lives in doable ways, as opposed to setting ourselves up for something that is just not going to happen. It also encourages people to think of time in terms of a week, because if you're looking for 3 times in a week, you are automatically looking at life in terms of a week, right? And I find that's really a much better way for most busy people to think through their lives.
That's good. Yeah, that's encouraging to me, because it is just difficult for something to be a part of your life every day, like especially in certain seasons. Okay. So your rule number 6 is 1 big adventure and 1 little adventure every week. And I am an Enneagram 7. Do you know the Enneagram? Have you?
Not very well. I've had people attempt to diagnose me.
Well, for sure. Well, 7s, which is what I am, love adventure, love thinking about the future, love like planning things, and kind of just want excitement all the time. Like that's what we're into. And the challenge for me is I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I'm also pretty committed to, more than I ever imagined that I would be, to nap schedules and routines, because as much as I love adventure, I also love when children are cheerful and, not a hot mess. So just tell us, what's the deal with 1 big adventure and 1 little adventure? And how do you see that working for people in, various seasons of life?
Yes, absolutely. It is definitely when you are dealing, especially when you have the 2 nap a day schedule with somebody who's under about 15 months or so, that can be trouble. Of course, it does change. Like they get out of that eventually, right. And then it's when you're down to 1 nap a day, that leaves, on a weekend, the morning is open for adventure, and it can be a good idea to start taking advantage of that window. But I mean, adventure is more a state of mind than an actual objective outcome. If you think something is an adventure, if it is memorable and out of the ordinary for you, then it counts. I guess that's all I would have to say there. So, I mean, in the book, I suggest some guidelines that a big adventure is like 3 to 4 hours. So think half a weekend day. A little adventure is just an hour, something you could do on a weekday lunch, a weekday evening, as long as it is memorable, novel, out of the ordinary in some way. And the reason to do 2 a week, 1 big adventure, 1 little adventure, is it strikes a good compromise between, having our routines, which are very important. Like routines are awesome and they make good choices automatic. But when every day is absolutely the same, then our brains don't bother remembering any of it. And that's what makes life start to feel like a slog. And also that these days are just disappearing into memory sinkholes. Like where did the time even go? I have no idea. And adventures help combat that and make the time feel richer. And in fact, feel like it's taking longer, helps slow down the experience of time. So, if you do have various restrictions on you for whatever reason that is, you can still always think of what adventures work in your life. Like if you don't have any money at a certain period of your life, you can think of free adventures. If you don't have any childcare, you think of adventures you can do with your kids. If you have a nap schedule that has to be adhered to, you map out the day and say, well, hey, we are going to do our adventure between 10:30 and 1, because that is the window between the kids' naps. We're going to, as soon as, the baby is up, we're going to go out and go do a little adventure, whatever it is. It could be, going to a really cool playground and getting lunch somewhere. It could be visiting a farmer's market. It could be, going for a play date with a new family you've never met up with before, but just doing some little thing. And then, come back for the second round of naps, during which maybe the adults can have their own adventures. I don't know. You can do something that's fun for you during that time. And, also feel free to occasionally take a break from the weekend kid care too. Sometimes it's fun for adults to maybe get a sitter and go out for a Sunday afternoon, go to do something that you wouldn't do with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old.
I love that. Yeah. Something that you've said before is, we, especially for working parents, we tend to sort of think these are the certain hours that we need to be working. These are the certain hours that, we typically would hire a babysitter to come or whatever. But when time is, when it's challenging to find those pockets of time, you need to look at everything with a clean slate, right? So maybe it is an afternoon that you and your spouse or your partner go and do something special. And we don't normally think, oh, Saturday afternoon, get a babysitter, but maybe that is the right thing.
Or even during a weekday. I mean, a lot of people have a lot more workplace flexibility these days than they ever have. And so if you already have a childcare solution in place on like Thursday afternoon, maybe you go have your big adventure from 3 to 6 p.m. on Thursday, right? And then you don't have to worry about finding extra childcare for it. And if you can make up the time by like working a little early on Wednesday and Friday, or maybe you do a shift on the weekend, if you and your partner can trade off for each other and get a little work time, then you can make up the time if you need to.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So the last rule that I wanted to talk with you about is take one night for you. I feel like this is one of your mantras that I'm like the least familiar with, and I'm finding it the most challenging. I really love this idea. And I think for me, during the pandemic, like not getting out of the house for a while, I did really feel depleted by that. Like it was like all kids all the time, So, when I do get out, whether it's singing at church or meeting a friend for dinner or seeing a show, it is very rejuvenating for me. And I have to say though, doing it every week can be hard. Weeks get busy. So why is it important to take one night for you every week? And how would you suggest that somebody do that?
Well, I think one of the best things you can do is to make a commitment to something that automatically meets every week. So you mentioned church, if there's like a spiritual small group that you meet with every week, or if there is a choir you sing in, that's what I do. But other people, if you have different things going on in life, you could do a regular volunteering shift. Every Thursday night you are at the soup kitchen, or joining a softball team that practices every Tuesday night. Anything that would be a regular commitment and where your absence would be noticed. Yeah. And the reason for that is because it can be, this is one of those things, taking one night for you sounds like so much of an extra thing that people are like, oh, well, if life gets busy, I won't do it. Or if there's anything else that's going on, I won't do it. And people often, when I first present this role, they're like, okay, I'm going to take a bubble bath. That's how I'm going to take one night for me. Like, well, I can identify many, many problems with the idea of the bubble bath being your official night for you. Because if work is busy, what are you going to be like? No, this is my night for a bubble bath. Like if your kid's like, I need you to drive me to the mall, you're like, oh, I'm going in my bubble bath. Like, no, your bathtub isn't going anywhere. So you will move your thing for everybody else's thing. But the net result is that your thing probably just isn't going to happen. It is only contingent on somebody else not wanting you to do something else, right? So if you have a commitment to something, if you are playing in a string quartet, if you do not show up, there are only 3 people, and that is a problem. And so you will be there. And you will be there even if life is busy. And you will tell your colleagues, like, look, I have to be there Tuesday night. I will cover for you Wednesday. I'll cover for you Monday. But, you cover for me on Tuesday. And we're like, okay, that makes sense. Your spouse knows not to schedule anything then without, consulting you or finding a babysitter, because you're not going to be there. Your kid who wants you to drive them to the mall is like going to know not to ask, because the answer is going to be no. Right. And because you have this commitment, it will happen. And so you will get the benefits of having this restorative active self-care. Now, people have come up with a million reasons for why they can't, and I am familiar with all of them. So, you are not going to come up with an excuse that I have not heard before of why you personally cannot do this. I would just encourage you to try, right? Maybe you're not willing to make a commitment to something long-term yet, but why don't you say, I'm going to sign up for 4 ice skating lessons, right? On Wednesday evening, and see what it takes to make those 4 happen. And after 4, like, you're done, right? You can see if the world didn't stop spinning, maybe you can, keep trying something else and figuring out how it goes. If everything collapses and falls apart, well, now, it was only 4 weeks. You can stop, like, it wasn't the end of the world. But my sense is that most people realize that it can happen. They've often just been making excuses for why it can't.
Yeah. And I like that you said, make sure it's a time when your absence is recognized or noticed, because for it to feel like it's something for you, if it's like after everyone's asleep, I don't know if it feels the same as if it does if you are, missing some of those, family duties that you might be doing the 6 other nights a week. Maybe it's a good thing to step away and let somebody else handle some of those responsibilities.
Oh, definitely. I mean, especially if you've got a rough bedtime battle every night, not having to do it one night feels really, really good. But, if you do need to be the one to do it, even just taking the time between, what would be, dinner and bedtime off, like can make it feel entirely different. I mean, most people are not spending that time all that well anyway. And
Right.
it's fine if, your partner can take it over, if a sitter can take it over. If you don't have that, maybe you can swap with a friend, you can swap with another relative, you can swap with a neighbor, you can go someplace like, you take a regular spin class at a gym that has evening childcare. Maybe if you're doing a spiritual small group, your, church can have the nursery open for that time. I don't know what it is, but there is going to be a solution somewhere.
Yeah. It's just rethinking those assumptions that we have about what we have to do or what's expected, or, you're the mom, so you have to be there for all the things all the time. Like, no, maybe you're a better parent or caregiver or partner if you do have a little time to yourself.
Well, and I'd also say no one's there every time, all the time.
Right.
It's just the question of doing it mindfully versus like missing it sometime because X, Y, or Z happened. It's
Yes.
Nobody does it all the time. We are just a little bit judgmental about what people miss it for.
Yeah.
And so, missing it. But the honest truth is nobody cares. I mean, that's another thing that people will judge. No, they won't. Everyone's wrapped up in their own little life. So I wouldn't worry about it that much.
Absolutely. We tend to be our own harshest critic. Laura, this is fantastic. Okay. Tranquility by Tuesday is out. It's available at all the book places.
All the book places. So yeah, I would love if your listeners would check out Tranquility by Tuesday. I hope you'll really enjoy the book.
Yeah, they definitely will. And where can people find you online, or where should they stalk Laura Vanderkam?
I'm all over the place. So you can find me on my website, lauravanderkam.com, or, listen to my podcast Before Breakfast or Best of Both Worlds. And I'm blogging a couple of times a week at my website, and, there's a good comment section going, and I always love hearing from people. So hope to interact with some folks there.
Yeah. Three times a week, is it?
At least 3 times a week, because it's a habit.
There you go. All right. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks so much for having me.